A kind woman adopts 5 unwanted homeless boys, raising them with love through unimaginable struggles, only for them to return 30 years later with a shocking act that changes everything. The evening sky hung low, painted in dull shades of gray, as the city slowly drowned in its usual noise. Cars rushed past, people walked quickly with purpose, but no one noticed the quiet suffering hidden in plain sight. At the corner of a broken sidewalk, near an old flickering streetlight, sat 5 boys. Their clothes were torn, their faces covered in dust, and their eyes empty. Not just tired, but forgotten. The kind of emptiness that comes when the world has looked at you and decided you don't matter. They huddled close to each other, sharing a small piece of stale bread. One of them, the youngest, tried to smile, but even that felt too heavy. Was this really how childhood was meant to be? Across the street, a woman stood still. She wasn't rich. She wasn't powerful. Just a simple woman, carrying a small grocery bag in her hands. Her face showed signs of a life that hadn't been easy either, but her eyes were different. They still felt. She noticed the boys. At first, she hesitated. People always do. She looked around, others had seen them too. Some turned their heads away. Some pretended not to notice. A few even frowned, as if the boys were a problem, not human. But she couldn't move. Her heart tightened as she watched the youngest boy struggle to chew that dry piece of bread. The way the others gently pushed it toward him. Even in hunger, they chose kindness. And in that moment, something inside her broke. If I walk away now, I'll be just like everyone else. Her steps were slow at first, then faster. The boys noticed her approaching and immediately became alert. Fear replaced the little comfort they had. Life had taught them one thing: strangers don't bring kindness. But she didn't stop. She knelt down in front of them, her voice soft, almost trembling. "When did you last eat properly?" No answer. Just silence, and cautious eyes. She opened her bag and pulled out what little she had: bread, fruits, a bottle of milk. She handed it to them gently, as if they were something fragile, something precious. This time, they didn't refuse. Hunger doesn't wait for trust. As they ate, she watched them quietly. Not with pity, but with something deeper. Something stronger. A decision. It didn't make sense. She barely had enough for herself. Her home was small, her life uncertain. 5 children? It was impossible. And yet, walking away felt even more impossible. "Come with me," she said softly. The boys froze. No one had ever said those words to them before. No one had ever chosen them. The streetlight flickered above, as if the world itself paused to witness that moment. 5 broken lives, and one woman with nothing but a heart full of courage. That night, she didn't just take them home. She changed their destiny. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of a miracle. Morning arrived with a harsh reality. The small house, once silent and empty, was now filled with unfamiliar sounds: soft footsteps, quiet whispers, and the clinking of metal plates. 5 boys sat close together on the floor, unsure of where to look, unsure of what to do, as if happiness itself felt unsafe. The woman moved gently around them, dividing what little food she had into 6 small portions. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But she smiled anyway. Outside, the world was already watching. Neighbors stood by their doors, whispering. Some stared openly, their eyes filled not with curiosity, but judgment. "She's lost her mind," one woman muttered. 5 boys? From the streets? What was she thinking? Another added. The words spread quickly, like fire. By afternoon, everyone knew. And no one approved. A man approached her gate, shaking his head in disbelief. "You can't even take care of yourself properly," he said bluntly. "And now you've brought 5 strangers into your home? This is foolish." She stood quietly, listening. Inside, the boys froze at every raised voice, their fragile sense of safety already beginning to crack. Was kindness really something the world punished? The woman took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the edge of her shawl. For a moment, just a moment, doubt tried to creep in. What if they're right? What if I can't do this? But then she looked back. 5 pairs of eyes met hers. Not with expectation, but with fear. Fear of being sent away. Fear of losing the only place that had ever opened its door to them. And suddenly, her doubt disappeared. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "They are not strangers," she said softly. "They are children." The man scoffed and walked away, shaking his head. But the whispers didn't stop. Days passed, and life grew harder. Food became scarce. She skipped meals so the boys could eat. At night, she stayed awake, stitching old clothes, trying to make them wearable. Every coin mattered. Every sacrifice was silent. Still, the judgment continued. People avoided her. Some refused to speak to her. Others simply watched, waiting for her to fail. But she didn't. Instead, something extraordinary began to grow inside that small, struggling home. The boys, once distant and broken, slowly started to trust. They began helping each other, sharing, learning, even smiling. The house that once held loneliness now held something rare, hope. And she protected it with everything she had. No matter how loud the world became, her choice remained stronger. Because she didn't choose them out of convenience. She chose them out of love. The world may doubt your kindness, but true courage is choosing it anyway. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into years. Life inside that small house was no longer just difficult, it was a constant battle. Every morning began before sunrise. The woman would quietly get up, careful not to wake the boys, and step into the cold darkness to find work. Some days she washed clothes for others, her hands soaked and trembling in icy water. Other days she carried heavy loads, her back aching with every step. And sometimes, there was no work at all. But she never returned empty-handed. Even if it was just a small bag of rice, even if it was barely enough, she made sure the boys never slept completely hungry. Inside the house, the boys were growing. Their voices became louder, their needs greater. School books, clothes, medicine, it all added up. There were days when one of them fell sick, burning with fever, while another needed shoes for school. Choices had to be made. And every time, she chose them over herself. There were nights when she pretended she had already eaten, just so they wouldn't notice the emptiness in her stomach. Nights when she sat quietly in the corner, her body weak, her eyes heavy, but her heart still awake. How much can one person endure for love? One evening, rain poured heavily outside. The roof began to leak, drops of water falling onto the floor as the boys huddled together, trying to stay dry. The youngest started crying softly, scared of the thunder. She quickly gathered them close, wrapping them in the only blanket they had. Her arms became their shelter. "It's okay," she whispered, even as her own voice trembled. But later that night, when they finally fell asleep, she broke. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she sat alone in the dark. "I don't know how, but I cannot fail them." The pressure, the exhaustion, the fear, it all crashed down in that quiet moment. And yet, the next morning, she stood up again. Because giving up was never an option. Slowly, the boys began to understand. They noticed the sacrifices she tried to hide. They saw her tired hands, her forced smiles, her silent struggles. And something inside them changed. They studied harder. They helped each other. They stopped complaining about what they didn't have, and started valuing what they did. Her love was shaping them, not through words, but through sacrifice. Years passed, and though life never became easy, it became meaningful. Because in that small broken house, 5 boys were learning what the world had never taught them. What it means to be loved. True love is not measured by what you give, but by what you sacrifice in silence. Time has a quiet way of changing everything. The small house that once echoed with the laughter of little boys slowly grew quieter. The same walls that had witnessed their struggles now watched them outgrow it. The boys were no longer children. They had become young men, taller, stronger, filled with dreams that stretched far beyond the narrow streets they once called home. Education, work, opportunity. The world had finally opened its doors to them. And one by one, they began to leave. The first departure was filled with hope. A small bag, a few clothes, and eyes full of determination. He hugged her tightly before stepping out, promising to return soon. "I'll make you proud," he said. She smiled, holding back tears, her hand resting gently on his head as she blessed him. But when the door closed, the silence felt heavier than before. Soon after, another left. Then another. Each goodbye was softer, shorter, as if emotions were becoming harder to express. Life moved fast, and so did they. At first, they called often. Then less. And then, sometimes, not at all. The house that once struggled to hold 6 people, now felt too big for just one. She continued her routine, as if nothing had changed. Cooking meals out of habit, setting plates that were no longer needed, pausing for a moment, before quietly putting them away. Was this the price of raising them to chase a better life? One evening, she sat near the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in fading colors. The same sky she once showed them when they were little, telling them that their lives would one day be just as beautiful. Now, she watched it alone. Days turned into months, and months into years. Occasionally, a letter would arrive. Short updates. A new job. A new city. A better life. She read each word carefully, holding on to them as if they were pieces of her heart sent back to her. But something was missing. Their presence. Their voices. Their warmth. Did they forget, or did life simply take them too far away? She never complained. Never blamed them. Instead, she smiled at their success, even if it meant facing her loneliness in silence. Because deep down she knew this was what she had always wanted for them. A life better than the one they were born into. Still, the nights felt longer. And the house, colder. But even in that quiet emptiness, one thing never changed. Her love remained exactly where it had always been. Waiting. Sometimes, letting go is the hardest way to prove your love is real. Years passed. Quietly, almost unnoticed. The once strong woman had grown old. Her steps were slower now, her hands trembling as she moved through the same small house that had once been filled with life. The walls were older, the roof weaker, and the silence, heavier than ever. Time had taken much from her, but not her memories. Every corner of that house still carried echoes of laughter, arguments, footsteps running across the floor. She often found herself pausing, as if expecting one of them to walk in at any moment. But no one came. Her days had become simple and difficult. She lived with very little. Some days, she barely had enough to eat. The same woman who once fed 5 growing boys now quietly skipped meals, sipping water to ease her hunger. Her clothes were worn, her belongings few, but she never complained. Instead, she held on to the past. A small box sat beside her bed, filled with old things, tiny shirts, worn-out school papers, a broken toy. Each item told a story. Each one reminded her of a time when she was needed. She would open that box often, her fingers gently tracing the memories. Was love enough, when life left you with nothing? One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the horizon, she sat outside her house, wrapped in an old shawl. The cold air touched her fragile skin, but she didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the road. Waiting. Not for something new, but for something that once was. I hope they are happy. That's all that matters. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the wind. She never blamed them. Not once. Because in her heart, their success was her victory. But far away, in different cities under bright lights and busy lives, those 5 boys, now men, carried something heavy within them. Guilt. They had everything now. Good jobs, comfortable homes, respect. The kind of life they once dreamed of. But with every achievement, a quiet question followed. The same question they tried to ignore. The same question that never truly left. How could they move forward, knowing who they had left behind? Late at night, when the world around them slept, their thoughts returned to her. To the woman who gave them everything, and asked for nothing. Her tired face. Her gentle voice. Her endless sacrifices. Memories they could never replace. And regrets they could no longer escape. Back in that small house, she slowly stood up and walked inside, closing the door behind her. The night grew darker. But somewhere, something was about to change. Because love like hers is never forgotten. True sacrifices may go unseen, but they never go unpaid. The afternoon was quiet, almost too quiet. A soft breeze moved through the empty street, carrying dust and forgotten echoes. The old house stood the same, worn, fragile, yet still standing just like her. Inside, the woman sat near the window, her eyes half closed, her breathing slow. Time had taken its toll. Even simple movements now required effort. Then suddenly, the sound of footsteps. Not one. Not two. Many. At first, she didn't react. Visitors were rare, almost non-existent. Perhaps it was just another passerby. But the footsteps stopped, right at her door. A gentle knock followed. Her heart skipped. Who could it be? Slowly, with trembling hands, she pushed herself up and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if time itself was holding her back. She opened it. And froze. 5 men stood before her. Well-dressed. Confident. Strong. But their eyes carried something familiar. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with silence, filled with unspoken emotions, memories, and years that had passed too quickly. The men looked at her, their expressions softening, breaking. One of them took a small step forward. "Do you recognize us?" he asked, his voice unsteady. She stared at them, her eyes searching, her mind trying to piece together the faces of the boys she once knew, with the men standing before her now. Time had changed everything. But not completely. Her lips trembled. And then, her eyes widened. Tears filled them instantly. "It's you," she whispered. In that moment, the years disappeared. The distance vanished. And all that remained was love. The men could no longer hold back. One by one, they stepped forward, surrounding her gently, as if afraid she might disappear. They held her carefully, like something precious, something they had almost lost forever. The woman's hands shook as she touched their faces, as if confirming this wasn't a dream. "You came back," she said, her voice breaking. But behind her words, there was something deeper. A quiet question. "Why now? After all these years, why did you come back to me?" Tears rolled down their faces as well. They had imagined this moment many times. Rehearsed what they would say, how they would explain, how they would apologize. But now, standing in front of her, none of it felt enough. Because no words could repay what she had given them. The house that had been silent for years suddenly felt alive again. Not with noise, but with emotion. Regret. Love. And something waiting to be revealed. Because this reunion was not just about coming back. It was about making things right. No matter how far life takes you, the heart always finds its way back home. The room was filled with silence, but it was no longer empty. It was heavy with emotion. The woman sat down slowly, still trying to understand what was happening. Her eyes moved from one face to another, as if she was afraid they might disappear again. The 5 men stood in front of her, not as strangers, not as guests, but as sons who had finally found their way back. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of them stepped forward, holding a small folder in his hands. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything they had carried for years. "We didn't come back just to see you," he said softly. "We came back to fix what we broke." She looked at him, confused. "Fix?" Before she could ask anything, another one gently held her hand. "You gave us everything," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "A home, love, a future. And we left you with nothing." Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She tried to shake her head to deny it, but deep inside she knew she had lost more than she ever showed. The first man knelt in front of her and opened the folder. Inside were papers. Documents. Keys. "We rebuilt your house," he continued. "Not just repaired it. We made it safe, warm, a place you deserve." Her breath caught. "What?" Another one spoke, his voice breaking. "And not just this house, everything around it. This land, it's yours now. Fully. No more rent, no more fear of losing it." Her hands began to shake. This was too much. Too unreal. But they weren't done. A third man stepped forward, placing something softly in her lap. "A bank card. There's enough here for the rest of your life," he said quietly. "Food, care, comfort. Everything you never allowed yourself to have." She stared at it, her vision blurred with tears. All those years, all those sacrifices. Was this really happening? Why would they do all this for me? I only gave them love. I never expected anything back. Her voice trembled as she finally spoke. "I didn't raise you for this." And one of them gently smiled through his tears. "We know," he said. "That's why you deserve it the most." At that moment, the walls of that old house no longer felt broken. They felt full. Full of love that had come back, stronger than ever. The 5 men knelt beside her, holding her hands, resting their heads close, just like they did when they were children. But this time, they weren't asking for help. They were giving it. The woman closed her eyes, tears flowing freely, but her heart felt something it hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because her life had changed, but because her love had come back home. And this time, it stayed. When love is given without expectation, it returns in ways beyond imagination.